Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. It's Friday Reads time, and I am so glad to be doing Friday Reads today. Last week I was out of town and I did not get to do Friday Reads, but we were in the Austin area for my daughter's 22nd birthday, and we made the rounds. We were in San Marcos and Austin and Wimberley, and we did go to my favorite bookstore, and which is Book People. And I thought I had a picture of us there, but I don't. All I have is I'll put this picture of Stephen and Emma Grace outside of Waterloo Records, which is right across the street. So, but anyway, we had fun. I also will not be in town next Friday, so I'm going to visit my parents, and but I'm going to put my October TBR in that Friday spot, so there will be something, and I'm putting the final touches on trying to figure out my October reading plan, as it were. Also, the loud air conditioning noise is back. This is mysterious because it will stop doing it for days at a time and then it starts back up, and it's unrelated to the entire breakdown that the system suffered a couple of days ago. It died completely, and that was a near-death experience, but it's been repaired, and because it's still in the mid-90s here. It's just, yeah, it's hot. All right, so TV, I can't even remember from 2 weeks back. I know that there's like 1 or 2 final episodes still of Reservation Dogs and Only Murders in the Building, and I'm really sad about Reservation Dogs ending. The show is ending, and yes, I'm bereft. But luckily, the Great British Baking Show is starting, so maybe that will soothe my malaise. And then the morning show started back. It's so melodramatic, and it has like these really good moments and tricky characters, but then it has these just outright soap opera type things in the plot. So I don't know. It's fun. It's pretty junky, but we kind of like it. And I think we're gonna try one of the new shows that's coming out. We might try the Changeling or the other Black Girl. They both look kind of good. I don't know. We'll see. So if you've watched any good ones lately, you can shoot them out to me there in the comments. All right, let's talk about books, because I have several books since it's a 2-week backlog here. I read first. I'm going to do the shorties. I have 3. Bring them up here. I have 3 shorties that I've read over this past period of time, in addition to my short story project, which are entirely different videos, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on that. But here's the short. Well, one's a nonfiction and 2 are novels. No, one's a novel and 2 are nonfiction. I'm going to get this right eventually. All right, the first one was Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs. This is a memoir. I read this back in the 80s. I've mentioned, I think when I talked about it in the TBR, I did a research project for a professor of assembling some background materials, readings, documents, first-person narratives, and things having to do with slavery. So this was one of the books that I read and recommended to him for his syllabus. And I was really struck, and it stayed with me. And then last year I bought a copy because I wanted to read it again, but it took me a good old solid year to get around to picking it up. Probably I was daunted by its immense size, it intimidated me. But finally I read it, and it struck me all over again. And it is the story of a woman named Harriet. She runs away to escape the clutches of a lecherous owner, and he searches for her for years, never knowing that she is right under his nose, literally living in a couple of different hiding spaces in people's houses in town, including in her grandmother's attic crawl space. And there she can watch her own children, mostly unbeknownst to them, over a series of years this goes on. And something that she really focuses on in this book is the whole issue of miscegenation and the laws and attitudes surrounding the children produced by unions between male slave owners and black women, and how every law was skewed to benefit the owners, of course. Technically it was illegal, but there was no, the men only profited from it because they owned the property. Any children that they had were now their property. And she gets into the dynamics that this caused in the white marriages, and the fact that if a black woman spoke out against the owner, she was committing a crime because she was admitting to this sexual union that wasn't supposed to happen. So she would be penalized, but not him. And at one point, she sums up some of these thoughts in a really powerful paragraph that I'm going to share with you. Slavery corrupts the owners. The master's sons are corrupted by their father's immoral behavior. The master's daughters hear their parents fighting about slave women and may overhear talk of their father having seduced or raped slaves. Sometimes a young white woman uses the same power over male slaves that her father uses over female slaves. An infant born to a white woman and a slave may be sent where no one knows the baby's history or may be smothered. But there's no shame when the father is a white master and the mother is a black slave. If the child's female when she is 14 or 15, her owner, the sons, the overseer, or all of them bribe her for sex. If she refuses to submit, they whip or starve her. Slavery makes the white fathers cruel and obscene, their sons violent and immoral, their daughters impure, and their wives miserable. But slave owners don't worry about their children's ruined character. They worry only about ruined crops. So she's touching upon the whole financial incentive of the whole situation. And there's so many moving passages about that where she breaks from the narrative of what was happening and just offers these reflections that are just really stunning. So it's a very slim volume, but very powerful. And I do strongly recommend Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. Then the next shorty that I read was The Duchess of Bloomsbury Street by Helene Hanff. And this is the follow-up to the greatly beloved 84 Charing Cross Road. And if you've never read 84 Charing Cross Road, that was Hanff's big hit. It's a book that chronicles 2 decades of letters shared back and forth between her. She was a screenwriter who lived mostly in New York City, and a bookstore owner and employees in London, in which it began as a correspondence where she was trying to order some difficult to find classics, and they were able to help her out. This was before online, purchasing and things like that. She's kind of a person that it doesn't really like to go out and about. I mean, she lived in New York City, but she didn't really like to go and scour all the bookstores and look for the books in person. She just wanted exactly what she wanted, and she figured she'd go to the source, because a lot of these were British and European books, and so she started this correspondence with this bookshop. And so over the years, they supplied her with books, but also with friendship and support, and this whole beautiful relationship springs up between the two sides through the letters. And one of the main threads is that they're always wanting her to come and visit, and she wants to come, but all these obstacles pop up, usually financial, because she lived pretty hand to mouth most of her adult life, with the start and stop nature of her writing career. And so anyway, she never does make it over there during the time of those letters that are exchanged in the book. But after that book comes out and she is experiencing success, she has an opportunity to go over there as part of the publicity, really, for the book. So this is her memoir about her trip to London. And it wasn't, I'll just say, it's not as good as 84 Charing Cross Road. And I think that's because it's the exchange and the growing relationship between the two sides and their conversations that make it so good. And this one is just her talking about things that happen. And she's a humorous person. There are some passages that are really fun to read, but it also kind of dragged a little bit. So she spent a lot of time detailing what she ate for breakfast and what she wore every day, and then she went to this lunch and then she did that. And so it was amusing. It's good. It's fun for fans of the original book, but it wasn't as good as the first one. That's how I felt. The final shorty of the past couple of weeks was a really good one, and that was Passing by Nella Larsen. And I read this as a buddy read with Kristen from Enter the Book, and it was a really great book for a buddy read. And also, it was my first time using Voxer. So she coached me a little bit through some of the steps, but we had a really good time reading and discussing this book. And it was short and it's divided into 3 sections. So it was easy to plan out the breaking points for the discussion, which didn't stick to the book, of course. We talked about all kinds of things, and I really enjoyed it. And but the book itself, it's written in 1929, published in 1929, and it is the story of 2 women, Irene and Claire. And they are both very light-skinned black women who have different thoughts and approaches to the concept of passing. Irene is able to pass, and she sometimes uses it for convenience. For example, if she wants to stop and have lunch at an establishment that probably would bar her if she presented as a black woman. Also to get tickets for things, to get better seats and different things like that, conveniences. But Irene is not trying to pass in her total life. She has, her family is black, her kids, one of her sons is darker, her husband is also not somebody who would visibly pass as a white person. She thinks that that's just fine and that she's comfortable where she is, and she just uses the fact that she's very light-skinned to now and then gain a little access somewhere that she might not otherwise go. And her husband is a physician, and they are living in the upper class black community of Harlem in the 1920s. Claire is a woman that Irene grew up with, and but at some point they had lost touch because Claire went to live with her white aunts after her father died. Claire is passing 24/7. She has hidden her previous life and married a very racist white man. She is on thin ice, and she seems to get a little bit of a thrill about reckless, dangerous behavior. And when she runs into Irene, she's very excited and wants to rekindle their friendship, and she begins to have sort of a dalliance with this black community in Harlem, and she's kind of walking that line between every time her husband goes away on a business trip, she's hanging out with people that she used to know in the black community. And the tension of this risky behavior kind of grows as the book progresses. And there's just so many interesting the book is mainly from Irene's point of view, and the issues of race and passing and privilege and the danger and the tension. It's all from Irene's experience. We never really get Claire's innermost thoughts. We just get what she says to Irene and in the scenes where there's conversations. But it's really quite fascinating, and it's a thin volume that's a really quick read, and the ending is not to be missed. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But it was fantastic, and I do want to read it again. Now that I've gotten to what happens by the end, I would like to reread it again and look at those conversations again that happened throughout the book. So we had a good time reading this. We both were very impressed, and I do recommend Passing. So that's it on the short ones, but I read a couple of long books too, and I guess the theme here is deep, dark doings in Irish novels. So the first one is Kayla by Colin Walsh, and this is a mystery. This is a book that a lot of people talked about that they thought might appear on the Booker long list, and based on the books that I read that are on it, I see that it could have fit in quite well there, but it was not selected. And so this is a debut novel, and it, as I said, it is a mystery. So, and I think that with mysteries, the thing that elevates some mysteries from being a fun entertainment into something more thoughtful is whether or not they are character driven instead of plot driven. In this case, I do think that character is the focus. So the basic plot is that there was a group of friends. This is heavy. I'm going to put it down. There was a group of friends in growing up in a small town in Ireland, a seaside town that has since this time in recent years has become more of a tourist destination. It's kind of developing and changing. But back in the day, which this was kind of funny because back in the day was 2010 in this book. The characters in the current time are about 30, and they're I've read so many books where a group of adults reminisce about some events from some fateful summer or fall or whatever back in 1982. Well, this is way back in 2010. So that they had cell phones and everything, but they weren't smartphones. They just text. But there was a group of 6 teenagers that hung out together, 3 boys and 3 girls, and at a certain point in their past, one girl disappeared and was never found again, and that was Kayla. Maybe it's Kayla. Stephen's reading this book too, and he thinks it's Kayla. I think it's Kayla. I don't know which one would be more likely as an Irish nickname for Catherine. If you know more about that, you can let me know. So anyway, so she disappeared. In the current day, 3 of the friends are the focus of this book. We have Joe, who has become a rock star, and he has come back to town to do some concerts and kind of open a business or venue in town. It's kind of like a giving back to his town kind of thing. Then we have Helen, who has come back to town for her father's wedding. He is remarrying. He was a single dad most of the time when she was growing up. We kind of find out more about her mother as the story unfolds, but her father is marrying, and so she's come back for this wedding. She's a journalist that lives in Canada, and everyone thinks it's some kind of glamorous job, but she's really just a freelancer, and she's always broke. And then we have Mush, who has always lived in town and has never left, and he helps his mother run a convenience store. And Mush has some serious facial scarring that it takes a long time in the book. You eventually find out the story of that, but it's kind of described right at the beginning. So these 3, the narration alternates in first person between those 3 people. And as it rotates to their different parts, it's sort of a shifting batch of memories of the past events of the fall back leading up to Kayla's disappearance, and then the current day. And the thing that sets off all of the cascade of memories is the discovery of bones at an excavation site that they are believing will turn out to be Kayla. So the mystery is, of course, what happened to Kayla. And then there's some other things in the current times that are murky and need to be figured out as well. The plot, the mystery itself is not especially innovative or surprising. Small town, dark secrets, things that people know and don't talk about, and people who've never been held accountable for different things, and all that kind of stuff that happens in any kind of story like Shetland or Broadchurch, or even one set in the US, the small town stuff and secrets and family weirdnesses and stuff like that. That's all there, and that's not particularly innovative. I think it's constructed pretty well here. But the characters are what really elevates it, and the style of the writing. It's really strong. The voices are distinctive, and just there's a recurring theme about just the difference between appearance and reality, and how people deliberately try to avoid breaking down that barrier, and looking at the dirty underside of things, and how part of how we keep ourselves going is to not think too hard about the really traumatic stuff. This is a book that gets progressively darker over time. It starts out, with a fairly, that kind of ominous feeling in the atmosphere, like everyone's about to have to dig into things they didn't really want to think about. And then once the digging begins, it just gets progressively darker. So I really enjoyed it. So if you like a dark, kind of dense mystery story that's really more about the mysteries within the human self, and not just about things that have happened, about and realizing truths about yourself and each other, that when you're left at the end, did you really want to know all those things? So that was Kayla. I really did enjoy it a lot. And then I thought that was kind of dark, but that's because I hadn't yet started reading Prophet Song, with all of these little things marked in here. So Prophet Song by Paul Lynch. This is the first book I've ever read by Paul Lynch. I was talking to Stephen. He had read a couple other ones. He said they were really good. And as I was reading, I said, man, this is really kind of relentlessly oppressive. And he goes, yeah, that's why I didn't really recommend his other books to you. They were good, but whew. And there was a note on the front of that about another book I want to look up. But Prophet Song, of course, just got onto the short list for the Booker Prize. I would not be surprised if they selected this as the winner. And I'm not quite finished with it, so I'm going to say a few things about it, but I'll probably talk more about it after I finish. The last portion of this book might have things that I really factor into my overall assessment. But I know you've heard a lot about this book already, and it is a book about Ireland falling under a totalitarian regime rather quickly, about a very aggressive party takeover of the government and all of the systems, and then the resulting rebellion that happens. And that's what's going on. But it's really about a woman named Eilish and her fight to survive and make sense of what's going on during this time. If this had just been a book about, without the dystopian overlay, if this was just like a family saga book, it would have been the story of a really busy, struggling, exhausted woman, because Eilish has 4 kids. But it is significant to note, and not a lot of people have mentioned this, that she has 3 kids that are like 16, 14, 12, and then there's a newborn baby, and Eilish is 40 and has a surprise 4th baby, and she has just gone back to work from her maternity leave. And I think that some of us in the audience would pick this up and go, "Ooh, that's a whole different ball of wax there." But so Eilish is a scientist. She has just recently returned to work. Life is hectic. It's a constant kaleidoscope of school drop-offs and sports events and baby feedings and exhaustion. Her husband is a union organizer for the teachers union. And the precipitating event in this book is that he gets picked up for questioning for a unexplained complaint, and he just vanishes. And he is just one of many people who have been picked up and vanished as the whole system of government and all is being replaced and taken over. Eilish is doing the best she can, but in this book, I was constantly frustrated with the pace at which Eilish is grasping the situation. Things are just going absolutely sideways, falling apart. I mean, the world is crumbling, and Eilish just repeatedly right in the face of something absolutely unfathomable happening, she'll be like, oh my gosh, well, we got to get in the car and get to school. And the kids even get to a point where they're just like, Mom, no, this is things, we're way past that. So Eilish, every now and then, I think she's sort of started to wrap her mind around it, and she'll have a little outburst where you think, yes, now she's getting it, and then she just cycles back into trying to tamp it down and maintain the normalcy and make dinner and tell the kids to take out the trash. And so, but you know, it makes you frustrated, and you think, why doesn't she do this, why doesn't she do that, why are they still there? But on the other hand, you think, well, what would I do? Would I try to ride it out? Would I try to get out of the country? What would I do in as all of the cards start to fall? She gets many clues. Oh, and her other problem is, I forgot to throw this one in here, is that her father is developing dementia. So she is the primary caretaker. He lives independently. He shouldn't be. He won't move out. Her sister lives in another country. You know, she's stuck with trying to keep him going when he is resistant to most of her efforts. So there's another exhausting factor. And she spends a lot of time in the book where she wants the counsel and the conversation with her father, but he's kind of in and out of time and coherence, and it gets progressively worse. But early on, very early in the story, on page 20, he warns her, and he says to Eilish, "We are both scientists, Eilish. We belong to a tradition, but tradition is nothing more than what everyone can agree on. The scientists, the teachers, the institutions, if you change ownership of the institutions, then you can change ownership of the facts. You can alter the structure of belief, what is agreed upon, and that's what they're doing, Eilish. It's really quite simple. The NAP is trying to change what you and I call reality. They want to muddy it like water. If you say one thing is another thing and you say it enough times, then it must be so. And if you keep saying it over and over, people accept it as true. This is an old idea, of course. It's really nothing new, but you're watching it happen in your own time and not in a book." And I think that's what Eilish can't grasp, that she is watching it in real time and she needs to respond to it. And what is she going to do? So I don't want to say too much more about it. I know a lot of people are reading it or plan to read it. It has not been released in the US. I was impatient and ordered it from Blackwell's because I needed to read it right now. So yeah, it's powerful. And also I want to say that the structure, the much talked about structure, which is kind of it's kind of a stream of consciousness. There's not a lot of breaks. There's no setting off of the dialogue. It just kind of flows and flows. And some people found that difficult to read or distracting or off-putting, but I think it really serves the story well. I think that it does add to the atmosphere of urgency and confusion, and the fact that all the little factors of everyday life just keep pushing and pushing and pushing in the midst of all of this greater, horror that's going on. And he, Paul Lynch, even, he adds to that with just little details, like in the cascade of talking and thinking and remembering things, and then at the same time she's trying to get a zipper unstuck on her baby's jacket, or an arm won't go through a shirt hole, and it's just that constant sense of being frustrated and pushed, and also I think that's all I'm going to say about it right now. But when I finish it, and the next time I come back, I will share a few more thoughts about the book overall, how it ended. But I will stop at that point. I think I have said enough about Prophet Song for right now. All right, that is it. I don't know. I'm going to look back in my shorties after I finish Prophet Song and see. I have a couple of short novels left that I was planning to read this month. And I also need to plan a trip book. I need to look in my goodies and find one that would be good for that. So let me know what you've been reading this week. Any thoughts about the short list? There's so many short list reaction videos. I'm not even gonna talk about that too much, but it was surprising. I was surprised. So I hope you have a great weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.